Here are the top stories at this hour. Ethiopia dismisses Al-Shabaab's claim of killing hundreds of soldiers. 3 naval personnel killed, 1 seriously wounded after submarine tragedy in South Africa. Plus, 2 killed, more than 21 wounded after strike on Kherson. Welcome to the World News on VOP TV. I am Kayla Abraham. We begin in Ethiopia, where authorities have dismissed a viral video issued by Al-Shabaab in which the Islamist militant group says it attacked an Ethiopian convoy in Somalia, killing 167 soldiers. The Ethiopian military issued a statement noting it had completely frustrated an attempted attack on Sunday by 450 Al-Shabaab militants. Colonel Faisha Ayele, the commander of Ethiopia's contingent in Somalia, disclosed that Al-Shabaab had also left 3 explosive-laden vehicles on a road which his troops had destroyed. He, however, did not mention any Ethiopian casualties in his statement. Residents told reporters that the clash took place near the southern western town of Rabdure, around 20 kilometers from the Ethiopian border. The Department of Defense has stated that 3 South African Navy personnel have died and a senior official in critical condition after 7 crew members of a submarine were swept off its deck by big sea waves as a helicopter attempted a vertical transfer of supplies. The department mentioned that Wednesday's accident had happened as an Air Force Lynx helicopter was attempting what's known as VETRAP, or vertical replenishment of supplies, to the SAS Mantatishi submarine on the ocean surface of the coast of Cape Town. The operation was immediately called off and a rescue effort was launched. All 7 submariners were recovered, but 3 were pronounced dead. A crew member from the helicopter who was dispatched as a surface swimmer to assist in the rescue operation was also recovered and is in the hospital alongside the 4 surviving submariners. The Department of Defense stated that the National Sea Rescue Institute and other emergency services were called in to help with the rescue. There will also be an inquiry into the failed operation and the resulting death. The South African National Defence Force, which comprises of all the armed forces, noted that a female officer with the rank of a lieutenant commander was among the 3 who died. Cape Town and other areas in South Africa's south coast have been hit by extremely rough seas since last week, caused by a phenomenon known as spring tide. Now, in the same vein, some 90 primary school students are in hospital after eating muffins suspected to be laced with cannabis in South Africa. The incident, which took place in a township north of Pretoria, came to the attention of the authorities after students displayed symptoms of nausea, stomach cramps, and vomiting. Gauteng Education Minister, member of the Executive Council, Matome Chilonane, expressed his concern and stated that investigations were ongoing. The students, aged between 6 and 14, are alleged to have bought the laced muffins from a street vendor on their way to school. Teachers witnessed strange behavior from the students in class and immediately called emergency services for support. Police were also called to further investigate and identify the suspected vendor. Now, a barrage of Russian missile strikes have killed 2 persons in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kherson and wounded more than 21 more across the country. Kiev Mayor Vitaly Klitschko disclosed that more than 7 people had been injured by Russian strikes in the capital. In the western city of Lviv, the strikes caused a fire in an industrial zone. Russian officials at the same time reported they had destroyed more than 20 Ukrainian drones, mostly over the Moscow-annexed Crimean Peninsula. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Air Force reported on Thursday that air defenses have destroyed 36 out of 43 Russian cruise missiles fired from 10 strategic bombers overnight. However, the Air Force's defenses destroyed 36 cruise missiles. Ukraine's surface-to-air missile units, fighter jet, mobile fire teams, and other forces contributed to repelling Russia's overnight missile attack. Additionally, around early hours of the morning, Russians attacked Kharkiv with S-300 anti-aircraft guided missiles. Emergency services are still working at the scene. Still, Ukraine's SBU security service and Navy have struck the Saki air base in Russian-occupied Crimea overnight, inflicting serious damage. The Russian military disclosed it had destroyed 19 Ukrainian drones over Crimea and the Black Sea and gave no details on casualties or damage. The source stated that at least 12 combat aircraft and manned portable air defense systems were located at the base in western Crimea and that the base was also used as a training base for drone operators. Ukraine has ramped up attacks in the Black Sea and Crimea, which was seized and annexed by Russia in 2014, as Ukrainian forces pressed on with a nearly 4-month-old counteroffensive. Kiev stated that a series of attacks on Crimea last week damaged 2 Russian patrol ships and destroyed a sophisticated air defense system. On Wednesday, Kiev noted that Ukrainian forces struck a Russian Black Sea Fleet command post near Sevastopol in Crimea. Poland, one of Kiev's strongest advocates and weapons supplier in its war with Russia, has stated that it is halting the delivery of arms to Ukraine until the grain crisis is resolved. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki mentioned in television that they are no longer transferring weapons to Ukraine and will arm themselves with the most modern weapons. He added that Poland was focused on the modernization and rapid armament of the Polish army so that it would quickly become one of the strongest in Europe. When asked about the grain crisis, Morawiecki mentioned that Poland is helping in the victory against Russian barbarian, but the government cannot agree to the disruption of the Polish market. According to the Prime Minister, the government responded to the issue of the grain from Ukraine appropriately. And asked about the Polish President Andrzej Duda's words spoken in New York this week that Ukraine is behaving like a drowning person grasping at everything, Morawiecki stated that these are very accurate words. And now, the Russian envoy attending the United Nations Security Council meeting on President Vladimir Putin's behalf was told to stop the war after he objected to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's speech on Wednesday. Russia's ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, was protested the Council President's decision to allow Zelensky to speak before the 15 Council members. Another heated exchange erupted at the table after Nebenzia referred to Edi Rama as Albania's prime minister and a NATO member instead of as the Council. Shortly after, Zelensky took to X and thanked the Albanian leader for correctly handling Russia as he shared a video clip of the heated exchange. Zelensky denounced Russia as a terrorist state, while Russian Ambassador Vasily Nebenzia sat facing him near the other end of the table's arc. Now, Azerbaijan is holding consultations with Armenian separatists after the Azerbaijani government had launched a military operation in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. The conflict had flared this week, but came to an abrupt halt after a ceasefire agreement was reached on Wednesday, with fighters agreeing to lay down their arms. The talks are taking place in Yevlag, over 200 kilometers west of the Azerbaijani capital of Baku. The dialogue comes after the Azerbaijani government announced a ceasefire agreement with the separatists in Nagorno-Karabakh, which had been facilitated by Russia. As a result, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev said his country had taken complete control of the Armenian majority enclave. Vehicles with Russian flags and Russian number plates also arrived for the discussion in Yevlag. Azerbaijan has stated that the talks will focus on the integration of Nagorno-Karabakh. According to the Turkish presidency, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Thursday vowed wholehearted support for Azerbaijan after a call with Aliyev. It was reported that gunfire was heard in Nagorno-Karabakh's capital amid the talks. And now the head of the United Nations have warned that the gates of hell are at hand as climate change intensifies, and top international officials stated that the world's leaders still aren't doing enough to curb pollution of heat-trapping gases. They pleaded with the major emitting nations to do more. Those nations remained silent. They weren't allowed to speak because organizers noted that they had no new actions to take. The only countries that touted their efforts, first movers and doers, the United Nations called them, were responsible for just 1/9 of the world's annual carbon pollution. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stated opening a special climate ambition summit with yet another plea for action that humanity has opened the gates to hell. Horrendous heat is having horrendous effect. Distraught farmers watching crops carried away by floods, sweltering temperatures spawning disease, and thousands fleeing in fear as historic fires rage. Guterres convened the summit with the idea that only world leaders who came with new concrete actions would get to address their peers on the issue. But leaders of the country that produce the most heat-trapping gases themselves chose not to speak. Heads of state from China, the United States, India, Russia, the United Kingdom, and France all skipped the summit. The United States, which has put the most carbon dioxide into the atmosphere over decades, sent its climate envoy John Kerry, even though President Joe Biden was in town. The United Nations didn't give Kerry a speaking spot, though he was at the summit. But California Governor Gavin Newsom was given the space to speak and tout his state's effort. The 32 national leaders who did qualify represent only 11% of the world's carbon dioxide pollution. China and the United States both emit more carbon dioxide than those 32 countries combined. The European Commission's president was also permitted to speak. Now, Lebanon's security agencies have launched an investigation into a late-night shooting outside the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon that caused no injuries. No one claimed responsibility for the Wednesday night small arms fire in the vicinity of the entrance of the heavily fortified compound in Beirut's northeast suburb of Orkar. It was not immediately clear if the incident was a politically motivated attack. U.S. Embassy spokesperson Jake Nelson stated that there was no injury and the facility is safe. A Lebanese official disclosed on condition of anonymity that shortly after the shooting, the Lebanese army took measures near the embassy, and later security agencies started an investigation including analyzing security cameras in the area. The American embassy in Beirut has recently published pictures of its new building. Some social media users believe that such a building is more like a spy center in the Middle East rather than an embassy. Now, Britain's King Charles III, has praised France's wonderful welcome at a grand dinner held in his honor night at the sumptuous Hall of Mirrors of the Palace at Versailles, marking his state visit meant to underline the friendship between both nations. In a toast mostly pronounced in French, the king stated that once again France and the French people have shown a warm welcome and profound kindness for which are most grateful. Charles and his Queen Camilla were greeted with a great palm earlier on Wednesday in a ceremony at Paris by French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte. The trip to France originally was planned for March, but had to be postponed because of widespread demonstrations against Macron's pension changes. Macron called the visit a sign of friendship and trust that he truly appreciates and deeply touches him. Now, Chinese leader Xi Jinping will meet Syrian President Bashar al-Assad during a visit to the world's #2 economy this week, a sign Beijing is taking more steps to expand its influence in the Middle East. The foreign ministry in Beijing stated that Xi will meet foreign leaders attending the Asian Games in the eastern city of Hangzhou. The ministry added that Xi will hold a welcome banquet and conduct bilateral activities on Friday and Saturday. State News reported earlier that Syrian's Minister of Economy and Trade, Mohammed al-Khalil, would travel with Assad. China has been stepping up its diplomatic efforts in the Middle East, most notably by helping broker the tender between Iran and Saudi Arabia in March. During a visit to Beijing by Palestinian Authority, President Mohammed Abbas in June, Xi proposed an international peace conference on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, though there have been few signs of progress on that. China's push comes as the Middle East has become less of a priority for the U.S. It also gives Beijing more sway in the Persian Gulf, the world's biggest source of petroleum. Last month, China's campaign for the BRICS bloc to add more members succeeded, with top oil exporter Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, and the UAE joining. Assad last visited China in 2004, about 4 years after he became president, when he met former Chinese leader Hu Jintao. It was the first time a Syrian head of state went to China since the two countries formed diplomatic relations in 1956. Now, a notorious Kenyan murderer who was serving 2 life sentences in the United States for killing 2 elderly women has been killed by cellmate. Prison officers found 50-year-old Billy Shemimer dead in his cell at the Caulfield Unit prison in Texas on Tuesday morning. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice disclosed that Shemimer had been killed on Monday night. A U.S. court sentenced Shemimer to life in prison in 2022 for killing 81-year-old Luthi Harris and 87-year-old Mary Brooks. He had been indicted on charges of killing 20 other elderly people in North Texas over 2 years. The authorities stated that Shemimer posed as a caregiver or maintenance worker to access care homes, after which he targeted elderly women at the facilities, often robbing them of valuables like jewelry before killing them. Shemimer was arrested in March 2018 after a 91-year-old woman he targeted at her independent living community apartment reported him to authorities. Meanwhile, according to a joint statement issued by both countries, Haiti and Kenya have established diplomatic relations. The document signed by both the Haitian and Kenyan foreign ministers, as they both announced they are to exchange ambassadors. Also, Kenya has offered to send 1,000 police officers to Haiti as part of an international assistance force. The Haitian government appealed last year for foreign help to tackle widespread gang violence. Furthermore, the United States has been leading UN efforts to organize a rescue mission as a draft resolution is being prepared. Now, Morocco plans to spend at least $11.7 billion in a post-earthquake reconstruction plan over the next 5 years. The royal palace had stated this after a 6.8 magnitude earthquake struck on September 8, killing more than 2,900 people, mostly in the high Atlas Mountains. According to the palace, the plan would target 4.2 million people in the worst-hit provinces, covering rehousing and the upgrade of infrastructure in a way that is conducive to social and economic development in the quake-hit areas. The palace stated that the plan would be funded by the government's budget, international aid, and a fund set up in the response to the quake. The fund has so far received some $700 million in donations. The program also included the establishment in each region of hubs for essential reserves, including tents, blankets, beds, medicines, and food provisions to respond to natural disasters. The quake-stricken areas are among Morocco's poorest, with many remote villages lacking proper roads and public services. Last week, the palace noted that 50,000 houses were known to have been damaged, and the authorities would provide shelter and $3,000 US to affected households. The military has appointed Prime Minister in Niger, Ali Lamine Zaine, held talks with the European Union envoy to the country despite strained relations with the bloc. The EU has threatening to impose sanctions on Niger in response to July's coup. Earlier this month, the envoy Salvador Pinto da Franca complained that he had been denied access to the French embassy. The French ambassador was staying there after being ordered to leave the country by the junta. In a separate development, Switzerland and Denmark are reported to have resumed humanitarian activities in Niger less than 2 months after suspending them because of the coup. Now, Ghanaian president has demanded the payment of reparations to African nations for the historical injustice of the transatlantic slave trade. Speaking at the UN General Assembly on Wednesday, Nana Akufo-Addo emphasized that this was the time to bring the subject of reparations to the fore. He stated that the world had for centuries been unwilling and unable to confront the consequences of slave trade. It is not the first time the Ghanaian president has spoken about reparations. Last year, he stated that the time was long overdue to intensify discussions about the issue. He then called for a formal apology by European nations that were involved in the trade and urged the African Union to engage the diaspora to advance the reparations cause. According to the UN, the transatlantic slave trade, which affected millions of Africans, was the largest forced migration in history and one of the most inhumane. Now, the Democratic Republic of Congo President Felix Tshisekedi has asked his government to fast-track the withdrawal of a United Nations peacekeeping mission to ensure it begins at the end of the year. The mission, called MONUSCO, took over from an earlier UN operation in 2010 to help quell insecurity in the eastern part of the Central African country, where armed groups fight over territory and resources. But its presence has become increasingly unpopular in recent years for what critics say is a failure to protect civilians against militia groups sparking deadly protest. More than 40 persons were killed and dozens wounded in an army crackdown on violent anti-UN demonstrations in the eastern city of Goma last month. Another protest in July 2022 resulted in more than 15 deaths, including 3 peacekeepers in Goma and the city of Butembo. Finally, on the world news, the UK Supreme Court has ruled that Mozambique can sue the shipbuilder Privinvest in Britain over allegations of bribery linked to a corruption scandal that caused the financial crisis. Privinvest denies wrongdoing, as a decade ago, 3 newly established companies in Mozambique took on debt of more than $2 billion, equivalent to $1.6 billion, much of it without the knowledge of the country's parliament. The loans were for government-sponsored investment schemes, including a maritime security fleet and a tuna fishery project. Mozambique alleged that more than $130 million in bribes were paid to corrupt officials and to Credit Suisse staff. The bank has already been fined hundreds of millions of dollars by international regulators. And that's it on the World News and VOP TV. VOP Business Show is coming up next. I am Kayla Abraham. Thanks for watching.